with Konstantin Staschus, and I'll be happy to take you through the first few slides, and then Sophie will take you through most of the details, and I'll come on again just before the Q&A part at the end. Fernando, I think it's recharging my slides, so I can't control them right now. Could you please go to the next one? The way I would, the way we have structured the presentation today is that we'll have a brief reminder of the EU policy framework, and then talk about the ETIP SNET platform. For many of you, this will also just be a reminder, but we might have some guests that hadn't heard the earlier webinar about the roadmap before. And then most of the hour we would spend on the actual implementation plan, on explaining in quite some detail the structure, and not all the 39 topics, but quite a few of the topics that we have prioritized. So you get a good overall feeling and impression of what's in the implementation plan and what it all means. The European energy policy, of course, is driven by the big objectives of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, increasing security of supply, and economic growth. All that against the background of the EU having 28 countries with different energy systems, and there also being some energy community countries in Southeastern Europe beyond those 28. The legal framework, just very briefly, was being built in the 1990s with the first energy package, the second one in the early 2000s focusing on the promotion of renewables and cross-border electricity exchanges. The third one updating common rules for the internal market with quite a few details, the network codes, the ENSOs, and so on. And currently, of course, there's a legislative process going on where the existing directives and regulations are being reviewed and partly recast for putting energy efficiency first, achieving global leadership in renewable energies, and providing a fair deal for consumers, who will be put more in the center than in the past of the entire energy system. And this package that's ongoing is called the Clean Energy for All European package. Background, of course, also is that, as in most parts of the world, the energy system has already changed deeply over the last 15, 20 years and will keep changing. At Europe, we have a very well-developed wholesale market and increasingly well-developed retail markets for electricity and also for gas. So lots of players there, customers, prosumers, distributed energy resources, large and small generators, traders, retailers, suppliers, service providers, aggregators, and so on. That's all the market players. And then there's certain regulated players, the transmission and distribution system operators, the regulators themselves, national regulatory agencies, the European networks for transmission system operators, both for electricity and gas, which do continental-wide plans and draft network codes, the Agency for the Cooperation of Energy Regulators, the market operators, and power exchanges, and so on. Another global background, of course, is the continued strong price drop in PV, wind, batteries, the perspective of electric mobility, heating in the northern parts of the world with heat pumps. We call that the sector coupling, to focus on the decarbonization of the entire energy system and do justice to the Paris climate protection goals. And finally, last but not least, the digitalization, a move towards more and more platforms that different market players, or also the regulated entities, provide to the market, so that this can become even more efficient, and the energy cloud, as some of us call it, and even the potential later on for peer-to-peer trading, as it's being experimented with blockchain and other tools already in some parts of the world. The integrated European energy market is a really important part of Europe's strategy for dealing with all these changes. Because if you have more and more renewables, as we do in Europe, strongly growing, then that integrated continental-wide market is best to handle temporary regional power surpluses and deficits that come from the fluctuating solar and wind input, and to also provide the consumers not only choice of suppliers and contracts, but ultimately to ensure their supply is secure, sustainable, and affordable. We've underpinned all of this in Europe for years with research and innovation, but there's still quite a bit of research and innovation left to be done to figure out how this can best evolve over the coming decades. As you'll hear from Sophie later on, research on markets and governance, on digitalization, on system flexibility and the integration with improved sector interfaces, and last but not least again, on the strong components of a flexible integrated system, namely a further improved transmission network, a much smarter distribution network, hopefully cheaper and more flexible storage, and flexible generation, both on the renewable and the thermal generation side. Continuing briefly the background where this came from, well, about 10 years ago, there was the original 20-20-20 goals that you see on top of the slide, underpinned by the Strategic Energy Technologies Plan that the European Union put on for the first time. This was updated in a more integrated fashion, where we looked at the whole system rather than individual technologies, and formulating the policy challenges that you see there with consumer efficiency, system optimization, and still technologies. At the same time, the goals were updated for the year 2030 with the numbers that you see there. And currently, the Clean Energy for All Europeans package is included as part of the overall energy union push by the European Commission. Could you go to the next slide, please? My connectivity is intermittent. The SET plan key actions that were agreed between the European Commission and the member states in the year 2016 are those 10 that you see on this slide. You can see by reading through them that all kinds of aspects of the energy system are being addressed, and I want to draw your particular attention to the one that's number 4, and that's highlighted in red here, the resilience and security of the energy system. And if you look at this particular one and compare it to the other 9, then you can see this number 4 is the only one that really emphasizes how things get integrated and how the overall system ends up being good for consumers. So this particular action is very close to what we try to achieve with the smart networks for energy transition. If you go to the next slide, Fernando, my connection is still bad for the time being. So we are now going into the second part just briefly for the ETIP SNET, the European Technology and Innovation Platform Smart Networks for Energy Transition. What's this trying to do? On slide number 8, we're showing how we have gone over the last few years from a somewhat more fragmented European Union advisory on research priorities to the more integrated framework that we now have with the ETIP SNET. It came out of the European Technology Platform Smart Grids and on another activity called the European Electricity Grid Initiative, but it now puts a new focus not only on research development but also on innovation implementation, and in addition on the sector coupling to the heating sectors and mobility sectors in particular that in the past weren't quite so strongly on the horizon of the smart grids, smart electricity grids activity. So the main objective is to address the innovation challenges in the whole energy system and the market evolution necessary for achieving the climate protection, which is an important part of the name, energy transition, and the renewables integration. Of course, always with affordability and security of supply, addressing the whole energy system. On slide 9, just a brief look at the mission of the ETIP SNET, setting out a vision for RD&I for smart networks for the energy transition, engaging stakeholders strongly, preparing and updating the roadmaps that Fernando mentioned, reporting on the implementation of activities, and building further research prioritization on what we see and what has been accomplished already in Europe, nationally, industrially, and even globally. I mentioned already the set plan action 4, which we interact with, identifying barriers, helping bring RD&I results to deployment, and again, consolidating the stakeholder view. Which stakeholders do we include? That's described on slide 10. There's a whole bunch of them, 12 different groupings. Of course, the grid operators on transmission and distribution level, national representatives, research, storage community, consumers, of course, flexible thermal generation, renewables, the ICT, network and software industry, equipment manufacturers, and number 11, the interface to the other energy carriers, heating, transport, gas, and so on, and finally, the regulators. On the following slide, number 11, very briefly, the organization we have given ourselves. There's a governing board, which I chair. There's 5 different working groups for experts, and one working group called the National Stakeholders Coordination Group, which pulls together smart grids platforms from the different countries within Europe. And on slide 12, you have a bit of a description of what these different working groups actually address. The first one, the overall system, to be reliable, economic, and efficient, pulling results from the others together, working groups 2, 3, and 4, addressing different sources of flexibility for the electricity system, which is urgently needed to deal with the increasing fluctuations of renewables in feed, and working group 5 to bring it towards the implementation in the business environment. And with that, I'm happy to pass it over to Sophie for the next agenda items.
Yes, thank you very much, Konstantin, for this introduction. And now I'm going to present in more details the implementation plan that we have just adopted last week. It was adopted by the ETIP SNET. So first, some words about the structure of the implementation plan. Actually, it's an innovative structure that we have developed, and I think it's important to spend some minutes explaining why we have chosen such structure, and then I will go through the different topics of the implementation plan. So first, as already explained by Konstantin, so we have so for planning the research and innovation activities, we are developing 10-year roadmaps, and this is something which is not new. We have done that, or Europe in general has done that first in the framework of the EEGI, so the European Electricity Grid Initiative. So here the focus was on electricity grids and the research and innovation activities allowing for RES integration. Then we moved to this new ETIP SNET, much broader, involving more stakeholders. And for this we used the Grid Plus Storage project, which allowed to develop the first roadmap adopted by the ETIP SNET, and it was published in January this year. And for this roadmap, the focus was mainly also on electricity grids and integration of storage and other sources of flexibility, and also integration with other energy networks. And we will work on an update of this roadmap. It should be published in 2020 or end of 2019. And we should continue this work, taking into account the broadened scope of the ETIP SNET. So let's go now on the next slide on the implementation plan. So on the first row of this slide, you have the different roadmaps. So here, the EEGI roadmap, which defined the long-term research and innovation activities needed to make the grid smarter and integrate RES generation at large scale. And this roadmap gave also birth to different implementation plans which aimed at prioritizing the research and innovation activities during 2-3 years. So for each roadmap, you have 1, 2, 3 implementation plan to make this prioritization of this short-term prioritization of research and innovation activities. So for the EEGI roadmap, we had an implementation plan covering the years 2014 to 2016, and next another implementation plan covering years 2016 to 2018. And finally, we developed, at the end of the grid plus storage contract, an implementation plan. It was just when the ETIP SNET was created. So this implementation plan, initially developed by grid operators and storage promoters, was then included in this new implementation plan, the one which is circled in red and which has just been published by the ETIP SNET. So we used this input from grid plus storage, used all inputs from the stakeholders of the ETIP SNET to manage to create this, to deliver this new document. And the cycle will continue. We'll have the next roadmap in 2019, and then we'll have another implementation plan, etc., etc. So we are working on long-term research and innovation activities in 10-year roadmaps and on prioritizing the research and innovation activities for the short term, and this is the purpose of the implementation plans. So now coming to this, to the structure of the roadmap. So a very simple overview here, and I have on the next slide some more details about this structure. So the roadmap has been structured according to what we have inherited from the past. So the past was the EEGI, the European Electricity Grid Initiative, and the research and innovation activities were structured along some clusters, some for transmission systems, others for distribution systems. And storage, sector interfaces, flexible generation, digitization were distributed in these different activities. So if we look at it in a more detailed manner, so here you have in heavy blue the transmission system the research and innovation activities related to transmission systems, and in light blue the activities related to distribution systems. Then you have different clusters of activities. For instance, for transmission systems, the first deals with modernization of the network, including planning, asset management, environmental aspects, etc. The second is about security and system stability, also with different subsections. Then we have the power system flexibility, also with different subsections about storage, demand response, etc. Then we have the economic efficiency of power systems, and finally the digitization of power systems. And well, a structure quite similar for the distribution system. And in this roadmap, so the one which has been adopted at the beginning of the year, we have, here you can see where storage is taken into account in the different activities. So as you can see here and there, we have storage which is impacted or involved in the different research and innovation activities. Similarly, we have also some subsections, some objectives of the roadmap dealing with sector interfaces, both at transmission level and at distribution level. We also have digitization topics, digitization, of course, is an important aspect, and it is mentioned at in different sections of the roadmap, both at transmission and distribution level. And finally, we also have functional objectives related to flexible thermal generation. These ones were added when the ETIP-SNET was created, and including power generators. So we have this structure. As you can see, the structure is still, the roadmap is structured along the transmission and distribution grid, and different topics are distributed in this structure, which is not fully satisfactory. And so for the implementation plan, we have developed a new structure. So coming back here to the left, so you have the structure of the roadmap. Here in the middle, this corresponds to the structure of the working groups of the ETIP, as presented by Konstantin. So we have the working group 1, which is mainly dealing, I would say, with transmission and distribution grids. We have this working group 2 dealing with storage and sector interfaces. Working group 3 dealing with flexible generation, and working group 4 dealing with digitization. So since we have these working groups created at the level of the ETIP-SNET, we had worked with them, and each working group has provided some inputs to the implementation plan. Since we have worked in this manner, of course, we had some overlaps in what was proposed by the different working groups, and this is quite natural since, of course, the grids, storage integration, the generation, the digitization, everything is interacting. So we had some overlaps, and in order to make a more robust structure and to clearly identify these overlaps, we have developed this new structure. So this is the one here on the right of the slide, and we have chosen to first present the topics, the research and innovation activities needed for the next years, but dealing with governance and market design aspects of the energy system. Next, we have chosen to present the digitization aspect of the energy system, since this is also very transversal. Then we have highlighted the different interfaces between the components of the energy system, the interfaces between grids and generation, grids and storage, storage and generation, etc. And then we have presented at the end the research and innovation activities needed for each individual component of the energy system: the transmission grid, the distribution grid, storage and sector interfaces. So sector interfaces mean interfaces between the electricity system and the other energy systems, so for example gas and heat networks. And then in orange, the flexible generation. So now if we move just to explain this choice, so we have provided a quite simple drawing, a quite simple picture, and the idea is not to represent the real connections between the different components, etc., but just to illustrate how these different components of the energy system interact together. So we have in blue the power transmission networks, and in light blue the power distribution network. Both of them are connected to other energy networks, gas and heat networks, for instance, through power-to-gas units or through heat pumps, etc. Next, we have the consumers. So here in pink, we have the consumers. They are connected, most of them, to the distribution network. Some of them are connected also to the transmission network. They are also connected to the other energy networks. And we also have flexible generation at large scale connected to the transmission network, and at small scale connected to the distribution network. And we can have also connections between consumers and generation, for instance, the so-called prosumers, those residential consumers having, for instance, PV panels or other generation equipment. And next, we have also the storage. So sorry, it's not written, but the green part corresponds to storage, which can be connected to the grid at distribution level or at transmission level. It can also be connected to generation units. It can also be connected to consumers. For instance, if batteries are used by residential or industrial consumers. And storage also can be connected to other energy networks, since, for instance, we can use the gas networks to store energy from renewable. So this simple picture has just the purpose to help mapping the different components of the energy system and their interfaces. And then on such a picture, we can easily position the different topics of the implementation plan or the different tasks foreseen by the roadmap. It can be positioned in one of the components. Here, for instance, some tasks, some topics are dealing with transmission network, and I would say purely with transmission networks. And some topics are dealing with connections, interfaces between different components. Here, for instance, interfaces between transmission networks and storage. So that's how we have structured this implementation plan. And now I propose to go through the contents of the IP. Well, I might not detail every topic, of course, because it would be too long, since we have 39 topics. So I will just go through very rapidly the different topics and make some focus. So back to the structure. So in the first section of the implementation plan, so we have topics dealing with governance and market design of the energy system. The energy system being with high-res and empowered end users. So here we have 3 topics. Next, regarding the digitization of the energy system, we have 6 topics. Next, regarding the interfaces between energy system components, we have topics dealing with interfaces between electricity networks and heat networks. One topic dealing with the interface between electricity and gas. 3 topics dealing with interfaces between transmission and storage. Then we have 2 topics dealing with interfaces between distribution and storage. And 3 topics dealing with interfaces between generation and storage. And regarding the components of the energy system at this level, we have topics dealing with transmission system, distribution system. We have 1 topic addressing both transmission and distribution. We have 2 topics dealing with storage and 7 topics dealing with generation. So now, if we go to the first part of the implementation plan, so the high-res and empowered and user energy system, governance and market design. So the purpose of the topics, the general purpose, relates to the organization of the operations of the energy system, the different interactions between the stakeholders and the market rules. So we have topic 1 dealing with a more efficient internal energy market, accounting for grid flexibility, market integration of RES and associated services. We have topic number 2, the flexibility market concept. Topic number 3, solutions to reorganize the respective roles and interactions of all stakeholders of the energy system. So as you can see on the table here, we have for each topic a target TRL. So the TRL is a technology readiness level from 1 to 9. Low TRL between 1 and 3, I would say, correspond to very upstream research, so fundamental research dealing with certain topics, while high TRL, 7, 8, 9, corresponds to research and innovation topics which are very close to the market, meaning close to be deployed at large scale. So as you can see, regarding this first section, we have different levels of TRL corresponding to different technological maturity of the topics. So here I propose a focus on topic number 2, the heterogeneous flexibility products. So here the purpose is to develop new flexibility products to be introduced in the balancing market. And these flexibility products could address energy storage, cross-border interconnectors, electric vehicles, demand response, interfaces between energy networks, etc. So the idea is to have a new design allowing the trading of those different flexibility products, especially when they address different energy markets like electricity and gas. And so this is a relatively low TRL between 3 and 5, meaning that a project responding to such topic would not deliver directly applicable solution, but it will help designing some solutions for the future. So here we estimate with the ETIP SNET members that a budget could be 10 million euros for such projects. And the idea, the expected outcomes, is to have a flexibility market concept ready for integration and implementation with the current energy markets across the EU. Okay, next, the digitization. So we have first 4 topics dealing with the smart networks and the full digitization of the power system. And next we have, so I'm not going to detail everything, it would be too long. So next we have 2 other topics dealing with digitization about the new opportunities brought by the full digitization of the energy system. And here I propose to make a focus on topic number 8, digitization and big data, IoT and IIoT. So here the TRL, which is estimated, would be between 5 and 9, meaning that we could have some solutions developed within the next 3-4 years, which could become applicable directly in the operational environment. And here the purpose is to understand and develop technologies related to big data and the Internet of Things and different interfaces, enabling full functioning of a smart grid system. So next, we have these different synergies between the energy system components. So first, synergies between electricity and heat, then electricity and gas, between electricity transmission networks, generation and storage, between distribution networks and different interfaces, and then between generation and storage. So here this is a focus on topic number 11, which consists in increasing energy efficiency by utilizing excess heat from other processes via heat networks and thermal storage. So here the estimated budget would be 10 million euro. We estimate that it's middle tier well, I would say, and the expected outcomes of projects corresponding to such topics would be to have energy and carbon dioxide savings, to have improved security of supply, to have a faster deployment of proven thermal storage technologies. Okay, another focus on topic 12. It's about the coupling of electricity and gas sector. So here the purpose is to develop power-to-gas solutions in order to continue using the existing gas networks, since, as you all know, I guess, we have a decreasing demand from households regarding the gas sector, but gas could also be used to store excess energy thanks to power-to-gas solutions. So it could be used to store in the form of gas the excess energy generated by renewable energy sources. So here the expected outcomes are the estimation of market size, opportunities, economic, technical feasibility of such solutions, business models, demonstrations of that type of storage. Next, regarding the improved components of the energy system. So we have one topic dealing with transmission and distribution grids. So this topic is about asset management. Then we have a number of topics dealing with transmission networks and also with distribution networks. So here this topic, which has been jointly developed by transmission and distribution operators, is about smart asset management using innovative hardware and software solutions. So here the idea is to develop new maintenance strategies. We estimate that the budget would be of about 14 million euros, and the outcomes of such projects would be to have new approaches for extending the lifetime of existing power components, so both at transmission and distribution level, and also novel approaches for managing critical assets based on probabilistic risk assessment and optimization of maintenance planning. So we have also at transmission level this topic dealing with cross-border use of ancillary and flexibility services, but I think I'm not going to detail it. We have also some topics dealing with distribution networks. And then we have the other components of the energy systems. So here in green, topics dealing with storage, and then in orange, topics dealing with generation, thermal generation, variable rest generation, hydro generation, and finally we have a cross-cutting topic. This is the last one of the implementation plan, which is related to the digitization of generation. So, well, we can make a focus on this topic number 31 about advanced storage technologies for energy and power applications. So here the purpose is to develop energy storage technologies, for instance, for applications such as balancing. And the idea is to identify use cases of storage in the various services, cost-competitive energy storage technologies, depending on the different usages. The regulatory environment also must be addressed by such projects. So here, the target tier would lie between 4 and 8. We estimate a budget of 30 million euros, and the purpose is to make some demonstrations in operational environments and to have energy storage solutions ready to be broadly deployed at European level. So next we have topics regarding flexible thermal power generation, but I think I'm taking too long maybe. So moving to the last slide, I think is that part. Again, a focus on another topic dealing with improved services provided by RES regarding the provision of ancillary services. But here again, I think I am too long. So I'm giving the floor again to Konstantin for the conclusions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sophie. We just have 3 slides left before we get into the question and answer part of our webinar. So we submitted a draft of this implementation plan to public consultation over the summer. We received answers from twice as many parties as for the roadmap a few months earlier, which was a great evolution. And there was a total of over 500 comments from these 70 parties, which we tried to address very methodologically by the support team for ETIP-SNET coming from the Intensives for EU project, where each and every of these 500 plus comments was looked at in its detail. Many of them led to changes and adjustments in the implementation plan, making it stronger and better. And some of them we had reasons to not take them into consideration, but even then this needed to be explained to the people who took the time and effort to comment. So we hope we went through all that all right over the last 3-4 weeks. And we have now published this last week, and I presented it in Amsterdam during the European Utilities Week. Where does that leave us for the near future? Sophie already mentioned that there will be multiple implementation plans for each roadmap. There will also be fairly soon another update of the roadmap, which concentrates even better than the current one on the sector coupling, going more or less in the same direction that Sophie and I have explained to you today, how to include the flexibility sources that come from the sector coupling and the decarbonization for the entire energy system, sort of as the guiding anchors and structure for our implementation plans and then also for the next roadmap. But I want to mention on the slide that you see on the screen now, also especially the bottom part, the ETIP-SNET energy system vision and scenarios. That work has started already almost a year ago and is a part of the Intensives for EU project and a part of the concentration of the ETIP-SNET working groups also. It's supposed to build on a whole bunch of European, national, and also global scenarios and visions for the far future, for a decarbonized and digitized future. Not to invent a new quantified scenario and not to second or third or fifth guess how many electric vehicles or how many heat pumps there might be in which year in the future, but to look at the totality of these other people's quantified scenarios and based on that describe how we best see the world evolving with digitization, with markets both on wholesale retail level, with good market and system coupling towards gas and heating networks and the mobility sector, and above all with the consumer at the center. How does the consumer deal with fluctuating prices with a smart meter, with the offers of fluctuating prices projected to him by his supplier, or sorts of hedging contracts? How do the appliances or the industrial equipment for industrial customers react to price fluctuation and to the smart grid and smart system and the sector coupling of the future? We feel there's a bunch that needs to be described there in a more coherent way than so far, and we hope that once we finish this next spring, 2018, this will be an even improved foundation for the future roadmap and implementation plan updates. Finally, as you know, in these working groups that we got, that I described earlier, we got lots of experts from all over Europe cooperating and helping us describe and prioritize the research and innovation that we need. Those working groups have so many members that there'll be some natural fluctuation in there. And in case you wanted to become a member or became aware of us recently and want to check whether it's a possibility, don't hesitate to contact us. And there will be opportunities in regular intervals to update the membership and to consider new applicants so you can contribute. Also, there are regional workshops. 2 of them are already passed in Aachen and in Lisbon, and 2 of them are still coming up for Southern Southeastern Europe in Cyprus in November, and for the Nordic and Baltic regions in Riga on 7 to 8 December. The first 2 had quite good attendance, often one case 80, in the other case well over 100 people, and very, very good discussions based on real projects and recent implementation progress in the region. And that was a real enrichment of our European level discussion, bringing people from a similar region together. And last but not least, we'll have further public consultations on the roadmap, the next one, and on the implementation plan. Now, with that, we're at the end of our presentation, and I'm looking forward to the question and answer part.